Becoming a data leader is like climbing a mountain. It takes perseverance, adaptability, and a clear vision of the summit. So discover the best practices for building and managing high-performance data teams that drive business value, and take your career and leadership to the next level in this episode, which is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Amplitude. Now, it's really, really interesting when you think about today's guest, because Evie Dineva's career has transformed, as she would say, from a lab rat in clinical biochemistry to a trailblazing data and AI leader, where she is now group head of data engineering and data science at Gymshark. She shares her insights into creating a data-driven culture, driving business success, and developing your career as a data leader. So make sure to keep watching. Coming up in this episode, technology innovations as a driving force, teams' progress, empowerment and attitudes, T-shaped teams, challenges in the cultural mindsets, and leadership's role, especially and lastly, data and AI's future. Evie, I'm really excited to discuss what makes a successful data team these days. But first, being a data leader, could you tell us what you do now?
Specifically, my role right now, or how my roles have shaped over my career, very much has been twofold. One is around how do you look at an organization's data assets and position them in a way that they don't just become kind of the how and are enabler, but really strategic in the decision making that we do on a day-to-day perspective, how we utilize data to kind of maybe look into the future as well and maybe make more informed decisions, but also how could we build potentially even taking it all the way to the right, like data products or solutions that maybe drive cost efficiencies internally or directly affect in a positive way the return on investment or customer journeys or outcomes, depending on what obviously market I've operated in for citizens or patients or clinicians or different sort of roles within different businesses. And then the other arm, and that goes within the leadership role, I think, at least in my experience, is how do you look after your people effectively in a way that puts the business decision and its needs first, but also nourishes people, I suppose, in a way that builds them up, builds up their capability to support the business better, but also builds them up as individuals and helps them in their own aspirations for their own career development, irrespective of whether that is horizontal or vertical, because sometimes it's a combination of both, sometimes it's one or the other. It is a right, there isn't like a right or wrong answer to that, I suppose.
And Evie, what drives you to be a data leader yourself?
I think it's just very nice to leave a legacy behind that is those business outcomes that you're talking about, like what sort of savings we've done and how much return on investment we've done. But the fact that you can go back, and I'd love to be one day in your position to say that I've looked after that many squads or that many individuals and helped them grow in their career, that legacy behind the people is very important. And for me, why I almost want to be a leader as well and want to grow in those spaces.
So let's move on to positioning technology innovations as a driving force to high-value business initiatives. From your perspective, where do you think data can help with that?
For my children and for my kind of descendants who will move even quicker. But I think one thing would always remain true is there will always be problems to solve, right? There will always be organizations or businesses that could change over time into the future and how they trade, but they will trade on things. They would want to optimize certain outcomes. They would want to support customers in a certain way. And actually, for me, when you start articulating, again, to my earlier point, the value and the outcomes you're seeking to achieve, and that's the why for me, right? Like, what are the outcomes, basically what we're trying to do for the business? What does it mean for us? If this existed, what does good look like? Actually, how would it change our processes? What would it look like for customers? What would it look like internally? And then working back to what is the solution and the optimal way to do that, to support these outcomes and our ambitions. I think it's the right way to do this. You cannot start with the how. Technology is the how, right? I think if we start with the why and then kind of across the value chain, we work to the what and how we're going to measure success, and then we get to the how. It creates to my earlier point, it creates a very sort of sustainable way of challenging and prioritizing what gets done and when, but also very much anchoring what we do on business value. And as I said to you, I do think that to make data and AI initiatives successful, you need to kind of start with that and work across that value chain. But equally, if tomorrow blockchain becomes kind of like a bigger technology set, and something else like, I don't know, quantum computing becomes kind of more accessible, I think that works irrespective of where the technology landscape and how it changes. Like, if you want technology to be successful, if you want data to be positioned as a strategic asset, then talk about the outcomes you want to do for the business, related to your business strategy, related to where your vision is and is going, right? And work backwards to what's the best way to use it, therefore, to do this.
I 100% agree. It's also about empowering as much as possible. But what do you think, Evie?
Uniting you with the business to like a purpose, right? I think it gives you a purpose that is bigger than I just need to build X or I need to change the code, and it goes towards I can see actually how I'm a part of the decision making. To your point, I feel more empowered, but also I can see the value that I'm creating because I'm part of the process and I understand it better. And do you know what? Like, businesses appreciate how much actually. As much as I said earlier, like, technology is the enabler, there are a lot of businesses out there, and I'd say a massive proportion, and there's some other kind of strongly disagrees, that quite literally where we are right now in this DNA and age, if you remove the technology department, they would not be able to operate. They would quite literally would not be able to operate and trade, right? And I can think of many, many scenarios where you've got any business that is using kind of, let's say a website to trade or apps. And there are a lot more of that nowadays than they're kind of just physical things, even physical stores, right? Or other entities. You need these people. So treating them as equals, kind of making them part of the decision-making process and giving them that voice would just really carve that relationship, really strong relationship for the future as well, I think.
I love that. And this brings up to the next topic and something I'm really into, building T-shaped data teams. Could you share your thoughts and experience on having done this?
What problem we're trying to solve, irrespective of what your title is. So whether you're data engineer, data architect, business intelligence developer, analyst, data scientist, ML engineer, like insert role title, is really important in understanding your business better and how you're driving kind of commercial value and operational value, but also positioning in a way that when I talk about T-shaped people is, I mean, that you could be an expert in an area and you could love this area, and that's absolutely fine. But having an appreciation of how you fit, not just in terms of your wider data team, but with your colleagues from, let's say, software engineering or front-end engineering, how you fit into the business as a whole and how you're delivering value in your area is what builds that T-shape, I suppose, for me. And I think that what that allows you to do, and some people are like, well, why should I even bother kind of learning about what other people do or caring about kind of expanding my knowledge in this way when I just love being, a data scientist, for example. The reason for it is because as you grow into your career and as technology moves on, and it's moving very quickly, you would need to inadvertently work with others to actually deliver value, to be successful in the solutions you build, to make them kind of stand up, 5 years from now and 10 years from now and continue to deliver that value. So appreciating the dependencies between one another, some of the pitfalls, some of the challenges that could occur, where kind of the handoffs points are, almost like the data contracts, is what would enable you to think about, well, how do I build things with scale and flexibility in mind, but also in a way that ensures the product lifecycle or the project lifecycle, depending on what it is not kind of hamstrung by, I'm just being very sort of narrow-minded in, I just need to sort out my thing, right? And I think that creates a level of flexibility and scalability and relationships as well, which are super important, that allows for that long-term resilience in what you're building, but also its commercial success in the business as well.
So, Evie, what challenges of pushback have you encountered around this in your career?
not everyone wants to, some people are very happy where they are. Some people want to grow vertically, some people want to grow horizontally. And some people, I suppose that change management and cultural mindset change is massive, and it's very difficult. I think change management and culture changes probably one of the most difficult things you could do as a manager leader in any business, irrespective of how small or big it is. But quite frankly, Ross, part of me firmly believes that if you do not, and if you don't push your people in this way, they will be behind the curve very quickly. And some of them probably already are. And where businesses are going, it needs to almost become a must as part of, job descriptions, how we hire, how we performance manage and support individuals in their growth. We need to be able to articulate. I feel like I almost have the responsibility to articulate to my team why it's important for the business and for its continued success in the future, but why it's also important for their career. Because I think even if people are not happy and then move on with this because they're unhappy with this narrative, more and more businesses would require that of individuals over time, because technology is just changing so quickly. You can't say, I've been a software engineer for 20 years and therefore I don't have anything else new to learn, because look where the cloud was, right? 20 years ago, and how much things have changed. And imagine what will happen 5 years from now, let alone 20, right? So I think the challenge is not necessarily with senior leadership. I think it's more, how do you kind of foster that culture and take people on that journey almost, and articulating that, and being aware that some people will probably still not buy into it. But again, positioning into why am I doing this? Not just for the business. I'm not trying to make your life difficult, but literally I'm doing it for you to protect your own career, and your own kind of, I suppose, knowledge and space, is really important. And there are people that won't want to do it, right? But we can all try our best in the process.
So, how do you work with career progression and attitudes towards development and, of course, career development?
People would have a different way of thinking and would be able to find different correlations, causations in the way they process, right? And to an nth degree. So I think sometimes, as much as you try and articulate why, having a big picture thinking, appreciating what others do is important, it's just difficult, right? We all think differently, we all perceive differently. And I think it's important to also be mindful then as leaders of the individuals who still are happy to learn and still have that clear aptitude and attitude towards broadening their horizons, but maybe they're not, I suppose, they can't go as far as we'd like them to. So I think there's something about, you can only push as far as you can, right? And recognizing that we also should kind of reflect back in and think about, but is this individual now, it's not about like lack of capability, it's just part of sort of their character, their being, and they've done the best that they can. And how do we ensure they still fit into the operating model and we still support them in the right way as well?
That's a really valuable outlook, and I think a lot of people could get a lot from that. But what insights could you share into supporting organizations as they move forward?
Thinking about like the strategy and what it means for the businesses, how we're doing move forward. And I think inevitably over time in your career, you split, right? And you have to make that choice. And there are people that are more than like comfortable problem solving. That's absolutely fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's great. And they contribute in a very valuable way. But you also need individuals who are willing to challenge the status quo, that are really driving the strategy of the business, transforming how we do things, because things move on very quickly, especially in the data and AI landscape. And if you don't have those people, if leadership is not kind of made up of individuals who challenge the status quo, want to build the business and drive growth, you stagnate, right? And as much as you're kind of great today, a few weeks' time, you will be already behind, right? Let alone a year or two.
As we wrap up today, a final question is, what are you excited about, Evie, for the future?
I think where the future is how can we utilize data and domain knowledge to really push the business forward, and what could happen in the future. So things like some of the more established businesses I've worked with is, they've got areas about like how can we simulate a potential end state, 5 years from now? How can we optimize our kind of a budget planning, or maybe what our next kind of innovation and how we want to disrupt the market, and maybe we want to go in a completely different space. So I think data and technology and AI will become even more the enabler for how businesses trade and operate, and become, and I love that word a lot, but ambidextrous. So essentially they have their first, kind of, I suppose, trading. They have a first purpose of what they're kind of trading on and how they're driving revenue. But actually, I think that more and more businesses will start utilizing technology, data, and AI to become something different, to play in a completely different space. You've seen it already, and you know better than I do with Amazon, right? Like, Amazon did not start as a data company, but look at where it is right now in the market. And I think smaller businesses will catch on with that very quickly. And I'm very excited for this. I think I would love to see a world where we make proactive decision making, we take risks, but we fail fast, and data and AI underpinning that. And I do believe that we're not too far away from it as well.
With today's insights, you now have the tools to ascend to new data leadership heights. And you can stay connected with Evie on LinkedIn and Twitter, where she really spends a lot of time and is happy to answer questions. And if you want expert advice on avoiding data team failure, check out our previous interview with Anusha, who's a manager of data management and strategy at EY. And from me, Ross Webb, and our friends at Amplitude, thanks so much for watching today's episode.